Yes, that's right. It's Joe here live for Joyrider TV, back with some more Q&A. Yes, that's right. Yeah, we've got a lot of questions in the preloaded today. So I'm just going to start firing through them because that's what we're going to do. We're going to answer some questions about catamaran sailing. All right, so the first one is coming from Sebastian. Let's just stick with Sebastian. Sebastian says, why is it that when sailing downwind with the spinnaker, the main sheet traveler is not further out, even though we're sailing downwind? Why is that? Yeah, so when sailing downwind with the spinnaker, we are generally keeping the traveler of the main sheet in a central position. So if this is the traveler, it would be pretty much central. So this is why that is. So if we imagine that we've got the spinnaker up, and what the spinnaker does is it really is like a sort of turbocharger for the boat, and it makes a big effect to your apparent wind, and it allows you to sail much deeper and much faster on the downwind leg. But so what that means is, although the true wind is coming quite a long way from behind us, which would usually mean that we want to have the mainsail, this is the mainsail, like really open. But because our apparent wind is no longer where it was, or even if the apparent wind is still on the 90 degrees, what the spinnaker is also doing is redirecting the wind direction over the mainsail. So you can, I think you can maybe see what's happening here soon as I put it like that. So the wind, if we were sailing on an apparent wind of 90 degrees, which we would still do if the wind was reasonably light, like if it was not windy enough to start lifting the hull at all, then we would still be looking for that 90 degrees apparent wind roughly with the spinnaker up. And then what that's doing is that's allowing us to still get a flow of air over both sides of the sail. And then as this flow of air comes down the spinnaker, it's getting bent round, which means by the time we get to the mainsail, the wind that the mainsail is using is in quite a different direction, which is why we can see that if the wind here is in this direction, having the mainsail out like that is just going to cause drag and turbulence. So to avoid drag and turbulence, we have our traveler in, and we're just going to control like fine tuning with the main sheet. And that is why we're sailing with the main sheet tight, the traveler tight, with the spinnaker up. Now, two extra things to that. One is, in super light wind, the helm, who is this guy, might want to start sitting like on the front in a racing situation. Let's say if you were sailing just cruising, keeping it comfortable, it's unlikely you'd do this because it's not very comfortable. But if you're racing and you're really trying to get everything out of the boat, you might be sat on the front beam up towards the mast. And if you keep the traveler central in this position, what happens is your Malcheski Composites tiller extension is going to be fouling on the traveler cleat and the main sheet as well. So you're not going to be able to steer at all. So in those conditions, I would just ease the traveler out by like that much. It's not much, like 2 inches or something. And that means you've then got enough space to steer. The other end of things is when we're sailing. Can we go down here? Yes, we can. When we are sailing in a strong wind, this airflow is really getting bent round even more, and it's coming very fast over the back of the mainsail. But not only that, we are then going to be using the mainsail to support the mast. So if here's our mainsail, spinnaker pulling from there, and all the rigging attaches kind of here. So that's where the forestay and the shrouds are coming from, which means we need to support the mast. I know we've talked about this before, but we need to support the mast, because if we don't support the mast up here, that could be a lot of pressure trying to pull the mast forwards, maybe to leeward a little bit. So we're going to sheet the main in hard. That's going to pull the top of the mast backwards and counteract the force of the spinnaker pulling it forwards, which means that we are supporting the mast, which is what we need to do. Worst thing we can possibly do is if we're steaming it along downwind with the spinnaker up and we stick the nose in. When we stick the nose in, the boat slows down suddenly, and then our apparent wind and the pressure is going to go from here round to here and increase in pressure, because we're no longer sailing at a similar speed to the wind speed. And all of that extra pressure is going to be taken by the top of the mast. So if you let the main sheet out when you stick the nose in, that is like, if I was going to go out sailing and for some reason, don't know what that reason could be, I deliberately wanted to snap the mast, that is what I would do. Stick the nose in, main sheet goes out, all of that pressure taken by the top of the mast. If you do that 3 or 4 times in a row, the mast's going to go. So we have to sheet in tight when it's windy, and definitely don't sheet out if the bows are dipping. If the bows are dipping, and in fact, this is going to come on to the next question. So let's come on to this in the next question. But there we go. That is why we are sailing with the main sheet and the traveller reasonably tight with the spinnaker up. Cheers. Very good, as you were. Welcome on board to everyone who's on board. In the live chat already, we've got Scott dropping it in the slot. All right, and Scott says, does anybody have any ideas on limiting mast rotation on a Hobie 16? Hobie has an undisclosed back order release date on mast bases and mast steps. Oh, I see what you're saying. Your mast base and step are so worn that now the mast rotates much too far. Yeah, I would check out the I did a masterclass video with Hobie 16 master William Edwards from South Africa. It's on the Joyrider TV channel, and if you check out that video, he does talk about a device that limits mast rotation. And to be honest, it was quite a while ago that we talked about that, so I can't remember what that was, but it should be in that video. But some sort of retrofitted plastic insert that you can put into the mast base, I think. All right, we got Jens on board. Hello, Jens, channel member Jens. Good evening on this lovely day. Very good. And also in Germany, we've got Hans. It says hello to all the cat sailors. We've got Richard on board. Richard is in Dubai. Summer's hotting up. I didn't think it actually cooled down at all in Dubai, but really glad to hear some downwind and spinnaker top tips. And I'd just like to say hello to Eric, who has jumped in with the first super sticker of the Q&A. Yes, the super stickers are what keep the Q&A ad free. So if you're like me and you like to put a video on for when you're doing the washing up, and you don't want to press the skip ad video with a soapy finger, the Q&A is going to keep that soapy finger off your mouse. Yeah. Okay, I'm just keeping myself entertained here. We've also got Jochen on board. Hello, Jochen. Yes, got your question in the preloaded for a little bit later on. Bobby's with us. Nice to have you with us, Bobby. Bobby's just logged a new speed on the speed stick on a what was it, on a Mistair 4.3. First time seeing one of those. All right, Jens is in there with the super sticker. Thanks very much, Jens. Keeping the Q&A ad free. All right. So Paul is on board in Ottawa. Nice to have you with us. Lee is with us from Big Bear, California. All right. Paul says, thanks for the speed stick call out. My 3-year-old son and wife thought that was hilarious. Great stuff. Yeah. It's all part of the game. Definitely. Very nice. All right. We got channel member Max on board. Max is in Toronto. Thanks for the great tips. Yeah, thanks for being a channel member and being on board. Yeah, nice one, Jens. So into the next preloaded question, which from Rich, who I think is the same Rich who's in the live chat. If Rich in the live chat is the helm on a Nacra F16, then yes. All right. So here we go. So we're talking about F16. It's the same principles for any type of catamaran with an asymmetric spinnaker. So same for an F18, same for your FX1, same for Tornado, same for a Hurricane 5.9 SX. Yes. So if we're just out having fun, we can bear away to control the power. But when we're racing, I know where this is going. I get worried about being above another boat where I can't safely bear away. All right. Yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from. I have been there. As a result, it often means I chicken out and choose to go very deep, staying below the other boat. If we want to keep a better course, i.e. above the other boat, what options should we consider in order of preference? Dump the kite briefly, drop the traveler, or just jibe off and keep the power? Now, I think what you really want to do is you want to go the way that you want to go. So, so let's just rule out, although, you know, sometimes you would have to put in extra jibes. So this is what Rich is talking about. So we're coming downwind, spinnaker up. And for those of you who don't know spinnaker sailing, with a spinnaker up on the downwind, all of our power control, or 98% of our power control, is with the steering. So if we're going downwind and we get a gust, then we'll turn more downwind, and that is how we deal with the extra power. So the worry here on the race course is if there's a boat, let's say there's a boat here, which to me seems like quite a common thing to happen when you're racing. And if there's a bit of wind on, especially if it's a gusty wind. It is quite a daunting prospect to bring your boat up to windward, because few things happening here. As we bring the boat up to windward to go past the other boat, we're going to power up. So if when we're sailing on this course, if we're already well powered, to power up more is going to be, you know, that is going to overjuice the juice. If I can say overjuice the juice, that might overpower us so much that we start becoming out of control, flying the hull and not able to get past. And what can also happen, this is just to make the situation worse, is as we come past, if we bring our true wind over here, we start taking the wind from the boat that we're overtaking, which means that they are then able, because they've got less wind, which means they can then easily head up towards the wind, which is both to protect their position, because if they just keep going down like this and we're able to hold this line and they just take it, we're going to just scream past, and they're going to lose that position. So on these downwind legs, it is quite likely, if you're sailing past, a boat underneath you is going to head up in order to protect their position and to keep their speed on, because we're taking the wind. So they need to power up more. So what is the process that we should take when coming downwind? The first thing that I would look at is in the big picture. So if we always start off with the big picture, and we could call this general strategy on the race course. And when you're looking at general strategy, you want to have, from the get-go, you want to have a kind of plan. All right, we feel that the wind is better on the left side of the course, so whenever we can, we're going to go to the left side of the course. But a lot of the time, it's going to be fairly even across the course. And, you know, if we're going around the mark and we can see there's quite a bit going on in front of us, and we're reasonably satisfied that the course is quite even, then this is when you might want to make the decision to jibe off, because what's going to really slow you down on the downwind especially is other boats. If you can't just sail along and get the boat going as fast as possible on that course. So if we're having this situation where we're like, no, I definitely can't get above these other boats, we're going to be overpowered, you're just going to basically sit there and take it. And whereas if we can jibe off and sail the boat really fast while all these guys are holding each other up, then we're going to gain in that situation rather than potentially drop back a bit. But okay, so that's one thing to look at in the big picture. So if we've come round the mark and there's a boat in front, what we want to do is we want to spend as little time as possible close to this boat on the windward side. So the right thing to do is to start heading up to go past the other boat as early as possible, rather than leaving it till the last minute. Because if we come flying in here with more boat speed, head it up quite hard, we're going to start lifting the hull and we're going to need to bear away, which, you know, it's a pretty poor situation to be in. Yeah, so by starting our overtake earlier and head pretty high, so we've got a bit of space if we need it. And then as soon as we get to a point where we feel that we can start taking her down a bit, of course, we don't have any rights on this boat because we're the windward boat. So we have to make sure we're not going to make this guy alter his course as we're coming past. But at the same time, we don't want to just keep sailing up here because we're going to be sailing a larger distance than what is optimal. So as soon as we get to a point where we feel that we could start taking her down again, then we'll start taking her down onto our normal course. Now, how can we achieve this higher course? Let's say we're already powered. All right, first thing, let's talk about the trapeze. If both people on your boat are sat in, then let's get the crew out on the trapeze. If the crew's out on the trapeze, but the helm is sat in, if the helm's feeling nimble enough, let's double trapeze it. When we double trapeze it with the spinnaker, we can achieve very high speeds. And there's very little chance that the guys on this boat will then decide to double trapeze as well. But as well as being able to sail faster, we'll be sailing closer to the wind because we've got more weight outboard, which means we can hold that power. Yeah, so double trapeze. Then, if things aren't looking that easy to double trapeze, let's say, one thing you could do is let the traveller out. But what letting the traveller out will do is actually slow your boat down. So remember the diagram from before with the turbulent airflow, the drag that is caused by having the traveller out. We're actually going to do that to slow our boat down. And by slowing the boat down, if we kind of think what the effect is, if this is now the apparent wind, so the apparent wind's been here. If we slow the boat down, the apparent wind is going to drop back, which then means that we can sail a bit closer to the wind. But the way that we most effectively handle our power on the downwind point of sail is by sailing fast. So as soon as we start slowing the boat down, the boat is going to become less stable. And yeah, we actually did this in one of the races in the last ever Hobie Tiger World Championships, where I think we were coming second. We were pushing really hard and we jibed too late for the buoy like this. And to make it to the buoy with the spinnaker up, we thought, okay, we don't want to drop the spinnaker. Let's let the traveller out. And the boat became really unstable. And yes, we stuck the nose in and our finishing position was not as good as it would have been otherwise. So that's letting the traveller out. And the other thing that we can do, if it's necessary, is if we're coming above the other boat and we do get a big gust and we know that if we were to bear away, there's a chance we could hit the guy on the trapeze on the other boat or hit the other boat or get dangerously close, then that is the time when I read it in a book once. It's called funking, F-U-N-K-ing the spinnaker, which is just to let it flap for a minute. And then that means the power from the spinnaker will be gone, but it's not a good way to deal with the power. But in case of emergency, let the spinnaker flap and that might help you. But the bottom line is, when you know there's a boat you want to overtake, start heading up as early as you can so that you put as much distance there as possible. Okay, I can see that Rich is in the live chat. He says, if the crew is already on the helms trapeze, how do you both get out on the trapeze? Yeah, that is a very good point. Yeah, because you're a bit stuffed if, as the helm, if your trapeze has already been occupied. Yeah, so no, I've got no answer for that actually, Rich. I would say perhaps the crew should start using their own trapeze. I know it's not as convenient. If we feel that these situations might come along, like if we're sailing in a big fleet, then perhaps it's more appropriate that the crew takes an extra couple of seconds to hook on, rather than limiting you from being able to double trapeze if it was necessary. That's the best I can do on that, to be honest. Yeah, so those are some options. And what about the option to dial it down deep? Well, there's always the chance that if the guys on the boat in front are heavier than you, because weight does come into it a lot in the downwind sailing, if they're heavier than you, then they're probably going to be sailing a bit closer to the wind than your optimal angle. And which means that you might be able to sail deep and fast and get underneath them, but so far underneath them that you don't start losing your wind because they're taking it. So that is the last one. All right. So there we go, Rich. Hope that was helpful. Okay, back into the live chat. Okay, gonna have a drink after each question, I think. It's really started to warm up here, as you might be able to tell by the rosy fella here. Yeah, so we got Sean on board. Sean is in Colorado, first-time sailor and Hobie owner. Very good. Thanks for being an invaluable resource. Thanks for taking advantage of that resource. It's you guys who watch the videos that keep the videos coming. Maybe that sounds obvious. If nobody watched the videos, I'd probably stop making them, to be honest. Yeah, but thanks very much. And well done for getting into some Hobie sailing. It really is something that will change your life, I feel. All right, Grant is on board. I think we've got a question from Grant. Yes, we have, in the preloaded. Grant says, I'm also dealing with a pretty worn Hobie 16 mast rotation and considering just a loop of line down to the dolphin striker. Might be too simple, but won't cost much to try. Yeah, you could try something there, like where if you got your front beam dolphin striker coming down like this, then somehow I'm feeling that the line is going to be blue. Sorry, bottom of the mast, and then this is looking onto the front of the boat. Rope going onto the front side of the mast, then possibly coming down around the front of the dolphin striker and then onto the other side. But that might just, yeah, how is that gonna help? Maybe if it took a full wrap around the dolphin striker, but we definitely want to be going around the dolphin striker where it is as close to the front beam as possible, so that we're not loading up with pressure on the dolphin striker, which could overstress things and damage could occur. All right, so we've got Bernhard in the live chat, and Bernhard is packing his bags for Vasiliki. Great stuff. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Very nice. All right, so kite winds with this is good advice actually. Train more, move like lightning, faster than seconds. There we go. Boom. It's the harsh truth. Train more, do better. Okay, as we continue, moving on, a lot of questions today in the preloaded, so perhaps I'm not lingering on them for quite as long as I have done in previous sessions, but it's keeping it I think it's keeping it interesting. Okay, so the next question is from Alex Joz, who says there's almost always a safety boat in your videos. It's true. Is it really somebody like on duty on the water, or how does that work in Vasiliki Bay? Well, it works extremely well, because if this is what Vasiliki Bay looks like, this is accurate and to scale, and there's the harbour, and then it kind of opens up as we go further out, and we're mostly talking about in the strong winds. So this is where wild wind is, where the sailing is based from in Vasiliki Bay. And then the main windsurfing area is kind of like this bit here. So this is where the sailing boats have to stay out of. Thanks very much, Richard, for jumping in with a super sticker. Thank you very much. Keeping the Q&A ad-free. Thank you very much. All right. So, yeah, so this is the windsurfing area. So the sailing boat area has got a lot of space. So, and along the beach, there's 5 different water sports centres. Each one has got power boats, ribs, which they're for safety cover. So in this area, there might be like 4 power boats in that area. And then wild wind, whenever it's windy, we'll have 1 power boat stationed reasonably close to the beach to basically to be like a what would you call it, like to protect the beach from boats flying in out of control. That is what it's about. Yeah. So there'll be 1 power boat sat inboard, and then a second power boat would be sat out sort of towards the edge of the windsurfing sailing area, but close enough to as far out as the boats go, which means that as well as the power boats, and to be honest, if it gets busy, then a 3rd power boat would be deployed to go into whichever area seems to require another boat. Now, it isn't as crowded as it looks on the diagram with power boats. This is not to scale. I think the distance here is about a mile or so. Hey, we got Ryan on board. Ryan is helping to keep the Q&A ad-free. I'm guessing that Ryan is watching from somewhere in Vasiliki Lefkas, Greece. Yes, Ryan is with us. Joseph was with us as well. Joseph, famous for taking probably one of the best what went wrong cover shots of all time. But Ryan, Elizabeth and Joseph have been visiting Vasiliki all the way from Maui in the Hawaiian Islands. I think that's probably the furthest that anybody's traveled to come here. If you think you've traveled further, don't know, as the crow flies, is New Zealand further? Maybe it is. Anyway, back to the point. Yeah, so it means that whenever a boat capsizes, if the guys see that the people on the boat are not doing exactly what they should be, or if in any way they could be helped, or if the guys in the powerboat aren't busy and they just want to go and point and laugh at them, then they come over pretty quickly. Like usually we could expect from capsize a powerboat getting to the capsized boat in like less than 3 minutes is the average time there. By the way, the wind direction would generally be like this in this situation. So that is how it's working. And the powerboats are on the water whenever there is sailing going on. So yeah, it's another reason why Vasiliki Lefkas, Greece is one of the best places to sail fast in the world, because not only do we still have flat water even when the wind's really strong, but it is really safe because we've got this safety net of powerboats that are there to help if something doesn't go wrong. All right, we've got Sean with a super sticker. Thank you very much, Sean. Keeping the Q&A ad-free. Great stuff. Yeah, thanks very much. We're doing well on the ad-free today. Yeah, so there you go. Alex, there it is. All right, so continuing in the preloaded. I think we're doing ever so well today, by the way, with these questions. I think they're a good variety of questions, very interesting. And it's always nice when, as you could probably imagine, from my end of things, to be answering questions that are different to ones that perhaps were answered last week or even the week before. I think after about 5 weeks, it seems fine to repeat things. But if it's when it's a little bit too frequent, it's kind of like, oh, I think we just talked about this. And I feel for the regular people who tune into the Q&As, and they might be thinking, oh, you just talked about this. So I try to put a different slant on it if it's a similar question to one that we had before. So the next question is from Grant, and this is about, yeah, because Grant had a bit of a sticky situation with a capsize. And it seemed that his mast had taken on some water. And if you capsize and there's water in the mast and your boat is inverted, well, firstly, if there's already water in the mast, your boat is going to invert very quickly because of that weight in the mast. Now, the second thing is, if you're inverted and your mast is leaking, it makes it extremely hard. It can actually be impossible to actually bring the boat upright, because if you imagine your boat, right, I don't actually think we've used this guy in this way before. If the boat is upside down, like this, and there's water in the mast, you know, you've got all that weight, and like if the mast isn't full of water, the water's going to run right to the bottom, which is where you know, it's going to be near impossible to bring the boat upright. All right, we've got another super sticker from Hobie 3000. Thanks very much, Hobie 3000. Keeping the Q&A ad free. Thanks very much, very kind. Yeah, so for this reason, we need to find out where the mast is leaking from. And the first thing we can do is, you know, in our Sherlock Holmes style sort of detective work of where is the leak, when we bring the boat upright, if there is a lot of water in the mast, if we can see water coming out of the mast through it'll usually be through a pop rivet or a fitting, then that's a pretty good indication that that might be the culprit where it's leaking. Other things you can see is if it's pretty hot where you have your boat, then you might see like a salty residue next to a fitting. But if none of this is working to find out where it is that the mast is leaking, then what I would do, and I think, yeah, Grant's on a 16. So here's the mast. And what you would have on a 16 is about, what would it be? Let's say it's about 1/2 meter from the bottom of the mast. There would be, depending on the age of the boat, 2 rivets in the mast that appear to not do anything. In fact, I tell you what, I don't think the 16 has this. This is on the bigger Hobies. But yeah, so, but this is what I would do to check to see where it's leaking from. Or better still, if your boat is one of the more recent ones and you have no intention of using a spinnaker, or if you do, then there's a fitting at the top here, which is held in with 2 rivets. And then what we're looking at is we're actually going to drill one of the rivets out. I wouldn't drill the rivet out from the mast tang. So the mast tang would be this fitting here where all the rigging attaches. I wouldn't drill the rivet out of this one, or definitely not out of the cleats at the bottom, or your Aussie style jib halyard, any of that. I would go for this one here or one of these. And then once you've drilled that out, what we could do is we could then cover the mast in soapy water, but probably not the whole mast, just focus on the fittings. And then we'll take a pump, like a bike pump would do it. But if you've got access to a compressor, then that's nice. But if not, some sort of pump or a foot pump, anything at all. And you might have to customize something that will go onto the pump and will fit reasonably nicely into a hole. And it's not going to take much pumping to totally fill the mast with effectively like a lightly compressed air. And then that air should start making some bubbles come out of wherever the mast's leaking. And then that means you know where the mast is leaking. Now, 2 ways that we could then address the issue of the leaky mast. One, and this is the better and more professional way, would be then to drill the rivets out. Let's say that there are bubbles coming out of here, this one. So we drill him out. And then what I would do is use some sealant and use a sealing, like a self-sealing rivet. A self-sealing rivet is Hobie Cat call them top hats, which is basically like this. That's not that it's not my best 3D work ever there, I don't think. So it's like a cylinder. This is closed at this end. This is open. And the idea is you put it in the hole and then your rivet goes into this, and that forms the airtight thing, airtight seal. But with a bit of sealant as well, that's going to do a good job. Now, but, you know, sometimes I'm doing what might be called a quicker job than the proper job. And what I would do is see where the mast is leaking, and I would put a little bit or just seal it over with some epoxy resin with a little bit of micro bubbles in to thicken it up. Because I feel that if you put some resin over the top of a leaky rivet, make sure it's dry and clean first, then there's no way that air can get in or out from there. That is what I think. So there you go. That is what I would do. Of course, you could also be leaking from the bottom, like the fitting where the mast base goes on, from the top. But again, all fittings, get some soap on there, and that should give you the clue. All right. So, yes, that's right. So, yeah, Ryan from Maui is in Vasiliki at the moment. He says it's so fun. I broke my Nacra 500 temporarily, so I had to come here to check out the Pacific, the 16, and the Tiger. Very nice. And probably, I would think, quite a novelty for Ryan to be watching the Q&A when it's not 5 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. Okay. All right. Great stuff. All right. All right. Paul's in with a super sticker. Thank you very much, Paul. Keeping the Q&A ad-free. Very nice. Thank you. All right. So Sean says, how unadvisable is it to sail with soft spots in the typical areas in front of the pylons on a Hobie 14? Yeah, soft hulls. What if there's just if we just have a fairly loose picture of a hull, front beam, and yeah, the most on a boat with a raised trampoline, the most likely place for the hulls to go soft are right here, because that's the bit of the hull where it's going to have the most time with people standing on it or sitting on it as they get on or off the boat. So it is going to be the spot which takes the most load. On a boat which doesn't have a raised trampoline, then it would also be, as well as there, this kind of area here where the helm likes to sit, because that's got the most kind of load on it. Now, in answer to your question, Sean, it depends on how big the area is. If the area where it's small, if the soft area is small, like smaller than the palm of your hand, then I would just crack on regardless, for the time being, but with the kind of thought to get it sorted out. Because what happens is, if it's soft a bit in a small area, that softness is going to just spread until it becomes a big area. And if, let's say, if you've got like a decent amount of your deck is soft, then one day what is going to happen is, when you sheet in the main, your boat is just going to fold in half, because it's the deck that gives your boat its structural integrity. When the deck glued on to the sides of the hulls, that is what gives the boat its strength. And if the deck has lost all of its strength and you sheet in hard, then the front of the boat might just fold. So if it's just a small area, or if it's a big area, do start having a look at repairing it. The epoxy injection method is very good. Or you could always as well cut a hole in the deck and put a hatch in. So there are options for fixing the boat. One reason why boats go soft is humidity in the hulls. So this comes from not draining the hulls fully after sailing. if there's water left in the hull, even if it's not that hot, I would reckon in like 15 degrees upwards, if there's water in the hulls, you're going to start getting humidity in there. And that humidity is going to create some sort of osmosis on the inside. All right. There we go. All right. Hobie 3000. It's Christoph from Shaboots here. Oh, yes. Fresh in on the speed stick as well. Very nice. What methods other than getting more trampoline tension can you recommend to make the Hobie 16 stiffer in the water? Yeah, I've got a Hobie. No, that's not going to work for this. So if this is quite a quick drawing of a Hobie 16. So if your boat is not very stiff, apologies for how bad this picture is, but if the boat isn't very stiff, in fact all of the looseness hopefully will be coming from this join between the castings, which are the bits like this, and the pylons, which are the parts coming out of the hulls, because over time those are going to wear, especially if your boat has been sailed in waves at all. That's going to wear them even faster. So what we can do, as well as cranking the tension on the trampoline, but actually you'd want to do this before you tighten the trampoline, is we want to, if we were to look at what's going on in there, so can you tell what it is yet? Okay, so that's the wall of the casting, that's the pylon. So this is an exaggeration. So there's going to be a gap between the pylon. This is not a very clear picture. A gap between the pylon and the casting. And what we want to do is put something in that gap. I would say a good thing to look at is some sort of plastic that you can cut into a strip that will go all the way round that gap. You can then take the bolt out that goes through there, push the plastic up into the gap, then use a drill or something to just to put a hole through that plastic. That's going to hold it in place. And then by putting plastic into that cavity, that is going to stiffen your boat up. It's going to do a pretty good job as well. Other people I've heard have used like beer cans or stuff, but the reason I'd worry about that using metal is if there's some sort of chemical reaction between the different metal bits, and if you're cutting up like a beer can or maybe a Coke can to put up there, then it might be quite sharp. Yeah, so there you go. That is what I would suggest. As you may have seen, I did Bad Boy 95. Woo! I epoxied the whole frame together. So I used epoxy resin to glue the castings onto the pylons. Now, the other place where the boat could take some of its flexibility from is where the pylons go into the hull. If when you like get someone else to lift one of the bows and look at where the movement is coming from, and if you can see that your pylon is not moving at exactly the same time as the hull, so it's moving in there, then that is pretty bad. That would be a job for a boat builder, because what we've got inside the hulls is like a block of foam, which the pylon is like glass, or it's kind of like a glass, fiberglass and foam block, which is then glued to the side of the hulls, and that is what keeps it all stiff. But if that for some reason has started coming loose, then that is probably quite likely to only go one way. But but on the other hand, positively, that is quite rare for that to happen. There we go. All right, continuing. We got Paul on board. Thanks again for the super sticker, Paul. Not urgent. We're going to talk about it though. On your C2, can you please measure the length of your spinnaker sheets and where you would start the taper so that only the dynamic core stays within the blocks? And if dynamic core stays within the blocks and foot, yeah, gotcha, and not reach the hands. Yeah, could certainly do something like that. Could find out for you. So what Paul is asking, just to fill you in, is the drawings are going to get more basic. Spinnaker goes to the first block there and the second block there. And what we want ideally is, we talked about tapered ropes before, where we've got a rope which is nice to hold in the hands, which gradually goes thinner. I've got one just here, but I can't reach it. Yeah, which gradually goes thinner so that you're not carrying the extra weight of that thick rope throughout, and it just helps the rope to run through the fitting, to run through the blocks, and for it less likely to get caught on stuff. So what we want is the thinner part of the rope, what we call the tapered part, to go from here round the block, and then when it gets about here, to then become the non-tapered part, which goes into the crew's hand, nice and comfortable, and then that would then go to the other side in the same way that it's done here. Yeah, so I'll look into that for you, Paul. If you could, if you haven't already, send me a message on Patreon just to remind me to do that, then I'll get onto that. Yeah, a great way of supporting Joyrider TV is on Patreon, or through channel memberships. But just launched less than an hour and a half ago, I've set up a GoFundMe page because I've got coming up the Tornado World Championships, and it's the most it's ever going to cost for me to go to the World Championships, and there's no way that I could afford to do it without the help of the viewers of the videos on Joyrider TV. So all donations very appreciated for the Tornado campaign. There's a video that launched just before the Q&A went live with links in there, but I'll start putting links in all the videos. Yeah, great way of supporting the channel and helping me to get to the Tornado World Championships, and also helping to pay for the rather uncomfortable snap mast to be repaired, because I don't know, if I couldn't replace the mast, what would I do? Just get a cheap aluminium one, don't compete anymore, and just use the Tornado as a drag racer in Vasiliki Bay? That'd be such a shame. So thanks for your help there. All right, nice one, Paul. So Scott says, Ryan, so glad you made the trip to Wildwind. Yeah, of course, Scott has made the trip from, I keep forgetting which state it's in. Is it Idaho, Ohio? It's one of the states in the north, towards the north of the USA. Yeah, Scott's been here. It's not Maui, but it's Vasiliki. Yes, it is. All right, we've got SA on board. Yeah, last week SA was talking about a laser course, windy enough to make it a capsize writing exercise. I went in expecting to control power with the sheet like in cats, but really need to move the boat move around the boat much more to keep it level. A great first experience in sailing, I would say. I'll do one more season of laser before buying the Beach Cat. Here is the question. Oh, this is a good one. This is a juicy one. Does the Catamaran plane? Yeah. Yeah. Some catamarans do claim to plane, like the modern shaped hulls on a lot of cats have got an extremely flat bottom and a rounded top. And for planing to occur, we need this flat surface on the bottom for the boat to skim like that. But how often are the boats sailed super flat? Because what happens is if the boat's flying the hull, I'm going to have to sort of, if that's the front beam, that helps. So if that's up in the air, the water would kind of be like this. So we're not really utilizing that planing surface. But on the Hobie 16, now this is going back to something I've talked about quite a lot in the past, but on the Hobie 16, with the shape of the hull on there, where the inside of the hull is curved and the outside of the hull is totally flat, what happens is when you're flying the hull, all the pressure is coming this way, pushing against the water. And if you imagine planing as we kind of imagine it is like flat like this, where the boat skims along on top. But if we're flying a hull and then we've got, so if this is our flat side and we lift the hull, so it's kind of like this, but the pressure is pushing down like that. So it doesn't matter that gravity is straight down. We're pressing against the water. And what that is doing is making a low pressure of water here and really loads of pressure here. So the boat is going to start planing on that side, which is why the Hobie 16 is so fast. When it's windy, if you fly the hull, take it on a reach. There we go. I'm not a science expert by any means, as you could probably tell by that explanation, but it is what I believe, and I've done a lot of testing. Yo, Scott is dropping it in the slot with a "You are amazing" super sticker, keeping the Q&A ad free. Thank you very much, Scott, and thank you very much. All right, so continuing. Follow up from Paul, who's asking about the tapered sheets on the spinnaker. Yeah, so what is the follow up here? Do you prefer a continuous spinnaker sheet or two-ended spinnaker sheets tied down with bungee? Yeah, okay, so two ways we could do the spinnaker sheets. And there's the spinnaker again. Very nice. Now, just to come back to the tapering question, what I would say and what I do is I would only have the tapered part of the sheet from the clue and not so long that it would ever go into the blocks. I just think because in the blocks, we want the ratchets to hold the rope, and the tapered rope, the thinner rope, isn't going to hold as well in those ratcheted part of the blocks, as well as the full width of the rope, which would be like an 8mm or something in that arena. So for me, I would just taper it that far, but we can, of course, taper it as we explained before. So from here, there's two ways we could do this with the spinnaker sheets. And what is popular now on the F18s is that the spinnaker sheet goes across here and it just ends there onto a piece of elastic that then goes under the trampoline, and then it does the same, of course, on the other side. And what that does is it keeps the spinnaker sheet super tidy, and it means that we always know where it is. Now, I think what I believe is the reason that this has become more popular is with the advent of the deck sweeper mainsail. It makes it even more important that we know exactly where the spinnaker sheet is at all times. And the Nacra Evolution actually has blocks on the trampoline in the middle to help the spinnaker sheet pass underneath the deck sweeper mainsail. So that is, I would say, why we would have the spinnaker sheets, so that they go in this bungee ended system. The only time when this, for me, doesn't work quite so well is if it's really, really windy, and it just seems that if you want to let the spinnaker out, then the sheet might not be long enough. But I'm sure that the guys at Nacra especially have worked it out so that it's really optimized, because the Nacra Evolution is definitely the best sorted out boat I have ever been on in all my days. So there we go. Or the other option, is that rather than it ending there and going to elastic, is just having it continuous, which is the more traditional way to have it. And that is still my kind of default setting for how to have the spinnaker sheet. All right, I'm going to have to start making these answers pretty quick now. We've been going over an hour. All right, where are we now? Ryan says, let's help Total Joyrider with that mast break. If everyone chips in, easy. Thank you very much, Ryan. Oh, and Scott has been to Maui as well. Very good. Yeah, Scott, I think, wins the award for most travelled and sailed everywhere that he travels to, member of the Joyrider TV global community. All right, Eric says, previous owner of my Hobie 16 installed two very small cam cleats in the front corners of the... Oh, I've just clicked on something. Of the trampoline side bars. Sorry, two very small cam cleats on the front corners of the trampoline side bars. Any ideas what these could be for? All that I can think those would be for. So just to illustrate this question, so a cleat kind of like here and a cleat kind of like here. What did you say, sidebars or front bar? Oh, front corners of the trampoline sidebars. Possibly for a jib traveler arrangement, or yeah, possibly if the boat had been rigged with a spinnaker and for some reason the previous owner wanted to be able to cleat the spinnaker off. That is all that I can suggest on that one. Okay, lovely old job. Right, back to the preloaded. So this is a good one from Mr. Tony KP, who I believe hails from Ebeltoft, Denmark, who asks, are sail numbers unique and are they equal to the boat's serial number? First part. So I'm sure, yeah, when a new boat is built, it will be issued or it will be put together with a set of sails, and in the kind of like, what would you call it, like the spreadsheet of all the boats that that manufacturer has built, they have to register the boat when it's built so that it can be get its certificate of conformity or something. And what you'd need is you have the serial number on the hulls, and then they'd also include on the same spreadsheet the sail number that corresponds to that hull number. Now, so most classes of boats will have a sail number allocated to the hull number, but what if you buy new sails? Do you transfer the number? And yeah, so let's say you sailed an FX1, very popular, and you were getting new sails made, then it makes sense to keep the same sail number, because that is the only way that you know that that sail number is going to be unique. Like for me, when I got when Thanos OS3 sails here in Vasiliki Lefkas, Greece, when he made me the mainsail for Bad Boy 94, we had to decide on a sail number, and we thought number 2, because laziness here, only one number to stick to the sail. Number 1 seemed a little bit too fresh, and I think it's the reason why when I go to the World Championships previously, there is a number 2 club, which there's myself with Bad Boy 94. There's also Marcus and Nick with Germany number 2. And then there's also Alan and Kim with Australia number 2. So the number 2 boats are all out there on the race course. So don't choose number 2. And then the other part of the question is, what about Hobie 16 sail numbers? So do the Hobie 16 sail numbers represent the amount of boats that have been sold? No. Yeah, so with the Hobie 16 sail numbers, every time a set of sails, official sails from the manufacturer are sold, they will already have a sail number on them. So then your boat gets a new number when you get your new sails on a 16. And so the Hobie 16 is up to, I believe, 130,000 on the sail numbers, which I'm guessing means that actually boats produced total globally something like 80 or 90,000 boats. But then do you think there's 40,000 sets of replacement sails that have been made? I don't know. There we go. Speculation all day long. All right. So in the live chat, we've got Marty on board in Switzerland. 32 degrees in Switzerland. I think the snow has possibly melted now. Mr. Tony KP on board. Sorry, I'm late. It's okay. Look forward to looking later on. And Mr. Tony KP coming in with a super sticker in Danish crowns. Krona. Thank you very much, Mr. Tony KP, for the very generous donation, keeping the Q&A ad-free. Thank you very much. All right. And Ryan says, reminder to hit the like button. Yeah. All right. So here we go. If we could, back to the usual of if you have got any other questions for the live chat, if they could be accompanied by a super sticker, that would be good. Otherwise, if we can calm it down in the oh, we need one more super sticker to reach the goal of 10 super stickers. It could be anything. If anyone wants to chip in like 10 cents or something, that would do it. All right, Jochen says, I found contradictory information on what the shroud tension should be on Formula 18 style catamarans. Now, this actually goes for Formula 16s as well, and Tornadoes, any other boats which have what I would call tight rigged catamarans. So what we're going to need is one of these. Now, this is a loose gauge, and this is what we use to check our rig tension. And on the loose gauge, the numbers that it measures in are along the top there. And those numbers are basically, I think you just call those loose gauge numbers. And then what we then do is we take, if we wanted to work out how many kilos of tension that is, we take the number, we look at the diameter of the cable, and then we go down the chart here to find out what the number is. And there we've got quite usefully as well is the percentage of the braking strength. All right, and Eric is there with the final super sticker. Eric, I think you've put in 2 today. Thanks very much. Thanks to Sean as well. We are getting back to this shortly. Yeah, Eric's gone in with 2 super stickers. Thanks very much. And Sean with the super sticker. Thank you very much. We have reached the goal, keeping the Q&A ad free. You guys are the best. All right, so back to Jochen's question, now knowing what the loose gauge does, is the Nacra dealer told Jochen to set the tension to around 160 kilos on the loose gauge. I have 4mm wire shrouds. So 4mm, 160 kilos, 10% of the braking strength. And that means that we're then putting the rig tension at 30, which I feel is very tight. So with the rig tension on these tight rigged catamarans, it is that as you get a lighter weight team, we would want to have more rig tension, because on these boats, more rig tension gives us a greater ability to flatten off the rig. So what it could be is some sort of confusion, because if we hit 200 kilos and it was actually from the reading for 3mm wire, then that means that we'd be looking at about, still pretty high actually, over 28 on the loose gauge, because the numbers that I've always gone by, which work well, is we'll have light team, which would be a light team, I would say, is 135 or less. Then a medium team would be from 130. That's not how you right, a 3. All right, sorry, it's a long day. 136 to about 155, and then a heavy team would be 156 plus. And the numbers that I would run for these teams would be for the lightweight team. So this is where we want the most tension. I would perhaps put this in at 28 or 29 on the shrouds. For the medium weight team, 26. For the heavy team, 24. And those are the numbers that I've always stuck by. So that is my view on this topic. Now, what that might have been, let's have another look. 160, 30. No, so that would, yeah. Yeah, so that is basically what I would do. And that is using the numbers on the loose gauge. So for a medium team, 26 on the gauge, 4mm shrouds, that's 115 kilos of tension. There we go. All right, so on to the last preloaded question. Have we got this? All right. And this one comes from 688 Lineage. All right. And maybe we could even answer this as a community with the live chat. It's quite an interesting one. How can you safely launch and land to the beach when it is very crowded, like with swimmers, I'm guessing, especially with strong wind and water, which is quite deep quite quickly, so you can't like walk the boat out beyond the swimmers. No way to jump in advance to bring the boat up the sand by dragging it. Yeah, this is tricky. If this is our beach and there's people all the way along the beach swimming, how can we best do this? Yeah, I'm a little bit stumped here. If I was faced with this situation, what would I do? I'd be very polite and maybe just try asking people, could you just for the next few minutes move to one side or the other, because I'm going to sail out here. Chances are also that the wind is going to be pretty much onshore, which means the line that you would take away from the beach would kind of be like this. So yeah, I think that is pretty much all we can do. The other thing we can do, if you're saying strong wind, then it's not like we can just, if it was light wind, we could climb onto the bows of the boat and paddle it out. But if it's strong wind, then no amount of paddling it out is going to do that. But perhaps, could we say if it was strong wind, there would be fewer people in the water swimming? Could we say that? Yeah, so really just asking people, do you mind just moving over a little bit, just so that I can launch my catamaran? Yeah. And if they say, no, do you mind taking your boat somewhere else? Then you could say, what about if I took you for a quick spin? How about that as a little sweetener? Yeah. Eric says, find a better spot. Yeah. Yeah, maybe this little headland here is a better spot to launch from. Yeah, it's a tough one. And then when you're coming back in, if it's windy, and so if it's windy, onshore wind, you're going to get some small waves. And then if this is a sandy beach, what I would opt to do is probably to drop the mainsail out at sea, so then we could come in just on the jib. And if the wind, if we were going too fast, we could then oversheet the jib really hard, slow right down, and just start sort of like as early as possible informing people that you're coming through, and try to choose the bit which has the fewest people. Just keep your eyes so open and scanning all the time, because you know, it would be an absolute day ruiner to hit somebody in the water. Sorry, we can't do much more to help on that 688 lineage. If anybody else in the live chat has got any good ideas for that, apart from find a better spot, or maybe take some sort of horn with you, so you can honk the horn, and that would do it. Nice. Okay, so there we go. Yes, I launched a video just before the Q&A went live today on the topic of funding for the Tornado Worlds. So all your donations are very welcome. Thanks to everybody who has donated to this Q&A, keeping the Q&A ad free. Jochen says, I will loosen the shrouds a bit. Yeah, I would. And yeah, that amount of tension, yes, the shrouds can take it. But what about the boat? The boat is like massively under tension. All right, thanks for the donation as well, Jochen. Very kind. And yeah, if you make a donation to the Tornado Fund, by the way, if you donate over 200 euros, I know it sounds like a lot, we'll go for a burning lap here, you and me, in Vasiliki Bay. You'll have to get here first, of course. All right, Holdy 3000 says, here we go. Coming in, head into the wind early, get the sails centered, and have the boat blown ashore by gently sitting on the bows. Yeah, the backwards is a favorite of mine as well. Yet another option. Thanks very much for that, Holdy. And okay, so I'll see you soon with some more on Joyrider TV. Ryan, I'll see you tomorrow in Vasiliki Bay. If it's blowing in the afternoon, maybe we should go for a sail. Sounds good.